From a former dragon aspect shattering the world to a digital plague infecting thousands of players, World of Warcraft has seen its fair share of unique events. As World of Warcraft approaches its 20th anniversary, moments like these have written the history of Azeroth itself through unique gameplay and story elements. It seems like there's always something new and exciting going on in Azeroth, so let's take a look at some of our favorites throughout the first 10 years of WoW. In 2004, during WoW's first year of release, players would eventually come across the zone Hillsbrad Foothills. Despite the zone's beautiful and seemingly peaceful atmosphere, Hillsbrad would actually become one of the deadliest zones of WoW's early years. The zone contained leveling questlines for both Horde and Alliance. The Alliance's main town, South Shore, was located here, and the Horde's town, Terran Mill, was a little ways up north, located here. Their close proximity caused players to constantly bump into one another, and all it took was a little spark of world PvP to ignite a never-ending conflict between the players in this region. With both factions spawning nearby in their respective towns and immediately running back into the fight, a never-ending battle waged on to push the enemy back into their town. There were no actual objectives like in modern PvP modes. Players were just fighting each other for the pure fun of it, and they became server legends. The endless battle was a precursor to the introduction of Battlegrounds a year later, and would be immortalized in the modern PvP brawl, Terran Mill vs South Shore. World of Warcraft's third expansion, Cataclysm, brought forth the destruction of major historical landmarks across the world. With zones forever changed, questing players had a chance to be visited by Deathwing, but not in a friendly way. Soaring in the sky and spewing flame down below, Deathwing would torch anybody unlucky enough to be in his path. The sky would change, wildlife and flora would be set ablaze, and players who have found themselves in range would be one-shot. However, if a player was killed by Deathwing in this way, they would earn the fitting achievement, Stood in the Fire. Back to Vanilla WoW. In 2005, the Rise of the Blood God patch was released, bringing with it the Zul'Gurub raid. Inside, the final boss, Hakar the Soul Flayer, had a surprise waiting for players that would end up accidentally killing thousands of players and causing an in-game pandemic. Hakar had a debuff that would be cast upon players named Corrupted Blood, which would deal damage over time to anybody afflicted and would spread to nearby players. Normally, this debuff would be removed at the end of the encounter for anybody that still had it, but there was an unforeseen carrier, companion pets. Animal companions could be hit with this debuff, and if they were dismissed before the fight ended, they would retain it until summoned again. As soon as the first infected pet was summoned in a capital city, everything was set in motion. No longer contained in Zul'Gurub, the debuff spread like wildfire to everyone and everything, players and NPCs alike. For nearly a month, players were being killed by corrupted blood, so much so that players would distance themselves from each other to try to contain the spread. This event would become so infamous in-game that it would forever be known as the Corrupted Blood Incident. A little later after this virtual pandemic, epidemiologists from the CDC used data from this incident to help aid in disease modeling research. A year later in 2006 brought the legendary patch, the Gates of Ankorage. This patch included a famous server-wide event involving players from each faction contributing to the war effort to become the first to ring the gong and open the doors to Ankorage. During this event, no matter your level, you could contribute to the war effort. Low-level players could turn in Light Leather or Peace Bloom, for example, while endgame players could turn in Thorium Bars or Mageweave Bandages. Every player was contributing resources to help complete this quest. Once completed, it took 5 days for these supplies to be boarded onto Zeppelins to Silithus, but in the meantime, players had to craft the Scepter of the Shifting Sands, then ring the gong. This would open the gates and players would have to make a stand, fighting off the old god Cthulhu's minions. What followed was known as the 10-hour war, and as you would assume, for the next 10 hours, Cthulhu's minions would burst out of the gates fighting all that dared try to enter. After the strife was over, the gates would trigger, allowing players to enter the new raids, Ruins of Ankorage and Temple of Ankorage. One of the rarest mounts in WoW was obtainable from this event, the Black Courage Battle Tank, and was only granted to players who rang the gong within the first 10 hours of the first person.
Fantastic!
With a new in-game event to celebrate WoW's 20th anniversary, you can re-experience some truly epic moments of WoW history like the opening of the AQ Gates, or battling through Blackrock Depths reimagined as a raid. WoW may be 20 years old now, but for each day, new stories are being told, events are being added, and legendary rewards are being earned. There's never a bad time to hop in and contribute to WoW's history yourself. Any fun events you remember that we missed? Leave them in the comments below, and we'll see you in Azeroth.